Hi, I'm Felicity Jones, and I play Jyn Erso in the new film Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. The movie releases this December, but you can see a very special sneak preview coming up shortly during this broadcast. You won't want to miss it.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here we go then.
Am I allowed to talk about the process? I said it out loud?
I can't talk about that.
I've locked it all away, like in a vault. In an internal vault.
This will be on after the movie comes out, so.
I know.
Good. Fantastic. Thank you.
We can talk about it, by the way.
Seriously?
And then when I do all the interviews, don't say anything then.
I was just astonished. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, it was the last thing in the world I expected. Part of me thought, oh my God, no, it's just a terrible idea. I had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I can't really see anything that I could add to it.
I was surprised. I mean, you know, you think, really? We waited this long? I looked better like 10 years ago. We could have done it then.
At the end of the first 3 films that we made, I had no thought whatsoever about revisiting the character or whether there was any ambition to bring the 3 characters back again. I never gave it a moment's thought. If I had been asked at the time, I probably wouldn't have imagined the potential for it.
The idea of the Star Wars saga continuing felt like a very unlikely prospect.
I think JJ's hesitation was everybody's hesitation initially, which is, wow, I want to do, I don't think it's something I can do, it's too much responsibility.
Who's at risk here? What's the outcome going to be? Who's going to survive this thing?
There were definitely tears from me along the way when I thought that I might not be able to do it.
I still thought that I was auditioning. I thought this was the last test.
I remember being scared of showing up on set and having no ideas.
I just remember thinking, oh my God, we are about to shoot this thing and I'm not ready.
You don't realize you start working on a Star Wars movie just how daunting that could be.
Obviously, I've been talking about retiring for several years now, where I'm not in the film business anymore, and I don't have to run a corporation. And it occurred to me one day that the perfect person to take over the company was Kathy.
When the Walt Disney Company bought Lucasfilm, they very much wanted to have a movie by 2015. So the most important thing was to start to pull together the incredible talent for the film, and starting with someone like J.J. Abrams.
First of all, great news in that we have a director, as of about an hour ago, which seems to have hit the press already, which is J.J. Abrams.
When Kathy Kennedy called and asked if I'd be interested in directing this film, I fully intended to say no because I'd been involved in other movies that were sequels, and I just thought I didn't want to do that again. But it was Star Wars, and I knew Kathy. When we were discussing it, there was this one moment that I instantly had the chills considering, which was a young woman. What her story is, I had no idea, but saying, "Where is Luke Skywalker?" It was so titillating, the notion that this character who we all know would be discovered by some new young heroine was incredibly intriguing, and it just felt to me like that was a great starting point for a story.
Feels very familiar to come back here. This is my 4th experience with Luke's films, and they've all been very satisfying.
Larry Kasdan, he was one of the first people that I picked up the phone and said, "Larry, we need you to come back in and be a part of this," and he didn't miss a beat.
I've collaborated with a lot of people, and this was as much fun as I've ever had. Writing tends to be claustrophobic, airless, and tiring. This was not. The amazing thing about the process was that he took his iPhone with the recorder on, and we walked for miles and miles and miles.
I'd never done this before, you know, wandering around, recording conversations. It felt good to kind of be in motion because so much of the movie's in motion.
And then, because of pre-production and everything, we wound up doing that in New York and Paris and London. It was like heavenly. And the whole time we're like figuring out, like, what's the story going to be? What's the next Star Wars going to be?
There was a feeling when I was a kid, when I saw Star Wars for the first time, that it was all practical and real. There were things like being outside the sandcrawler. It was a physical, tangible, real thing.
We're trying very true to be almost like a period piece, to really put the audience back 30 years after Jedi. So it's really doing a period science fiction film.
I love characters like this, you know. I believe them and they'll sort of blend in.
JJ sort of threw a creative challenge to us. The first priority is let's shoot it practically. But we kind of had to earn our stars, so you had to get that character to a point that he was worthy of going on the screen. We would show something to JJ and we would impress him enough for him to say, I can use that.
Keep coming, keep coming.
And so the interaction of those physical things actually creates something that's not artificial seeming. It doesn't seem arbitrary. And then, of course, so that will be augmented by the visual effects. You build what you can, and then if you want to see more, we have this wonderful magicians of ILM that will come in and say, well, of course we can see more.
And Rick spent a lot of time with Industrial Light and Magic. We had these images that you could refer to, and some of them became kind of iconic. And they would then go off and then react to that.
It was great to hear that they were going to try and do as much on set as possible, because, you know, really is hard to beat. We always try and augment our CG with live action elements. It gives a greater sense of reality, of course.
I think the interesting thing about Star Wars is it's a story that allows you to participate. Certainly for all young kids when the movie came out, they either wanted to be Luke Skywalker or Han Solo. And that was a part of our challenge, was how are we going to bring new characters into this series that had that same kind of power? And I think we have. I mean, I think one of the great things is we have a female lead.
What we were looking for was someone new, and this character needed to be vulnerable and tough, sweet and terrified. And to find someone that no one knew who could do all these things took a lot of looking.
You always feel like you're going to run out of time. You're like, oh, you know. But our casting directors, Nina Gold, April Webster, and Alyssa Weisberg, just did an incredible amount of work.
And we were very lucky to find some great people, but the truth is, it wasn't until we found Daisy that we just felt like she was capable of doing all of these things this character required. When we brought her in, I asked her to do this one scene, sort of this torture scene, very sort of intense, and she just blew my mind. She's reaching this depth, and tears were streaming down her face. I thought, this is unbelievable. And I asked her to stop, gave her a couple adjustments, do it again, and she did it again, and I thought, oh my God.
I guarantee he would have disappointed you.
Get out of my head.
John Boyega was one of the biggest Star Wars fans among the cast, and he auditioned, I think, 9 times.
Do you know how to fly a TIE fighter? I can fly anything. Why are you doing this? Because it's the right thing to do.
You need a pilot.
I need a pilot.
Yes, keep it in there.
The conversation was kind of JJ like really explaining to me how things would change and if I felt supported and what have you. And he wanted to know about my background because we hadn't really talked about my family.
He asked me whether I was ready, and he was like, do you realize how much of a big responsibility this is?
And walk forward, please.
He said to me, are you sure you want this? And I was like, if you believe in me, then I think I'm okay with that because I think you're pretty cool and pretty good at what you do.
He goes, well, you're the new star of Star Wars. And then everything stopped.
You know when like you're waiting for something and then the words actually come and you're like, okay?
He just said I'm the new star of Star Wars. And he was like, no, don't react, breathe.
JJ had said you can tell your parents. So I got in and my sister and my mum were there and I was like, I got Star Wars. And then it was like, oh my God. So yeah, but I couldn't sleep that night at all.
It was really, really hard just going through normal life without saying that I was casted Star Wars.
But yeah, that is the story of how it happened.
For those of us that have been working on this now for almost 2 years, it's incredible to realize that we're at this point right now.
We had a cast read through just before we started shooting. It was really moving. Carrie and Harrison and Mark, I don't think any of them ever imagined that they would be shooting any more of these movies ever again.
I can't say that I didn't have some reservation about it. It wasn't hard to convince me. It's just that I had not imagined the circumstance.
I was very nervous. It was trippy to have Harrison and Mark and myself in a room together doing this again.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Star Wars Episode 7. At the last minute, I was asked to read the actual script. Usually the director does that, but in this case, he said he wanted to be able to observe, and would I do that?
The Falcon and the surviving X-Wings roar past camera toward a planet.
That moment when we all sat in a circle and we saw all these faces, you couldn't believe what you were seeing. The young people and the veterans. This was a moment that will never be forgotten.
Hold on Luke Skywalker's incredible face, amazed and conflicted at what he sees as our music builds, the promise of an adventure just beginning. The end.
On the one hand, you had this sort of out-of-body, oh my God, I'm in this place with this crew. On the other hand, you had the most sort of primal terror of, oh my God, it was also the beginning of production.
That moment is like when you're at the starting point of a wagon train, you know, and everybody's gathering, and you say, who's that, and who's that?
I don't think we ever really felt like we were ready to go.
I know probably somewhere deep down they felt like, is this gonna work?
We're going out to face who knows what.
First day. Sandy. It's hot, but it's absolutely amazing. We walked to set. I see this huge, life-size TIE fighter crashed in the sand. For me, it was just amazing just looking around and taking it in and saying, I am here. We are about to film this movie. And J.J. Abrams, with his enthusiasm and his energy coming in and saying that we're starting Star Wars Episode 7.
I just want to say the obvious, which is that we are here on day one of Star Wars Episode 7.
You're here.
How incredible is that? Excellent. All right, should we rehearse one more time?
I just remember I was told that, oh, Daisy's doing her first scene. So I was just like, okay, let me go down and go see it.
What was the first scene when I was scrubbing the thing? My arm was aching.
I know. I was just relaxing and you were just working so hard. And you were just there like this.
My arm was aching and I kept not being able to get it right. Oh,
yeah?
my God.
Action, Daisy!
Oh my God, you could literally feel the sand burning through your shoes, which was crazy.
Set and camera. And wake up!
Then obviously Finn has to be in the Stormtrooper outfit. So let's just say it was a combination of sweat, passion, ice cubes, and a lot of water. A lot of acting involved, but at the same time, not a lot, because it's hot. I'm exhausted.
What you brought me today is worth 1/4 portion.
It's about 40 degrees, I guess, so it's hot in there, but it's Star Wars. I burned for Star Wars. I've worked with JJ many times. When I heard that he was doing Star Wars, obviously I was immediately on the phone like, what? What? I kind of thought that being in it as me, as my face, I think people go, oh, it's him from Star Trek. It might spoil it. So I was kind of torn because I was desperate to obviously at least be part of it in some way. And then we discussed the idea of me playing a character who was in full prosthetic, which meant I could have my space cake and eat it.
That's mine!
We cannot run them. We might in that quad jumper.
In Abu Dhabi, it was more cardio than anything else. And so a few weeks before the Abu Dhabi shoot, we were on the treadmill doing interval running. And what that did was just copied what happens on set. We would run super fast. We'd be running with the camera, a 20-second take. We'd breathe for a bit and JJ would be like, let's go again.
Not this way.
And cut. 1, 2. There and there.
Without the guys we were training with, there's just no way. Neither me or John would have been able to get through Abu Dhabi.
Keeping me in shape. Keeping the guns.
It was really hard. The actual hardest bit was when it was soft sand, hard sand, and one of the last runs was just a mix of the two, and that's just like a killer on the legs. Like it was almost a relief when there was explosions, because you knew like there was only so many times that you could do the running.
We go set, good energy, background action. And action, BB-8. We just ran BB-8 from the gates to escape from the TIE fighter attack. And I wasn't quite expecting that today.
It was very conscious on our part that there would be a new droid who's a major part of the story. And he's funny and sweet.
I didn't go through the film thinking, oh, this is going to be iconic. Oh, BB-8's like our version of R2. I never really thought of it like that. I was just like, oh, you're so cute.
And as you're walking, you want to kind of glance at him, sort of slightly annoyed that he's convinced you to take him.
He was the first character I had real scenes with, and I was nervous because it's not a human being. But because of the puppeteers, he comes alive.
Dave's doing the head, and Brian's doing the LEDs on the body, and I've got the drive system of it.
This version of BB-8 is the puppet version, and he is fundamentally a rod puppet. And this has been the model we've used most of all, as you get a really instant and organic performance with it.
What about the droid?
What about him? I asked JJ if I could have a bit more with BB-8 because I think it's such a nice bond, it's such a nice relationship. He's this talisman, I guess, that is the first constant that Rey has ever had. You're welcome.
First, thank you so much. You've been spectacular. It's been the most fun, the greatest adventure. I cannot believe that we've done the shoot here in Abu Dhabi. We can't thank you enough. We love you forever. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Slate one, take one.
We're actually in Pinewood Studios, and this is one of the stages that we shot on. One of many, actually.
Working at Pinewood was another incredible experience in this. This was a studio where some of the great movies of all time were shot. This is the studio where the James Bond films are made. You can't help but have reverence for the actual studio. Originally, Poe was going to die early in the film, and that was the script that Oscar saw. And one of his issues wanting to do this movie was that he had made like 4 movies in which he died early on. And he was sick of dying early on.
You know, I've heard a week or so later, JJ wrote me and he said, "I've got to figure it out, Poe's in the rest of the movie now." And so this idea that Poe comes back was something that was added later, which obviously for me was incredibly exciting and fantastic. I get to live. Going forward, you know, what he'll add to the fight against the First Order will be really exciting to see where that goes.
Boom!
Stormtroopers are formidable now. They have all sorts of new weaponry. They have a new way of fighting, and they're vicious and quite scary. When you see them on the set running out of those transport vehicles, it's frightening.
Captain Phasma is the first female Star Wars villain. I find it very heartening that a franchise like Star Wars, it makes it a progressive character. It makes it a modern character. A new relationship with a female character, which isn't about her being sexualized. It's about us responding to the choices that she makes.
This just rests on the shoulders, so this doesn't.
I was told that I was going to absolutely love my costume, and they put the helmet on me. I looked in the mirror, and I think I just giggled quite a lot. I thought, it's good to know there's a woman in there. So maybe subtly I can let that come across in the way that she stands, in the way that she holds her body. So there is something occasionally of a femininity to give this character a little bit more of an identity.
Sir, the villagers. Kill them all.
People want to tell you what your character is, and they have like such a vocabulary for those movies. Everyone likes to tell you you're a villain. I don't think villains think of themselves as villains. I think they probably really think that as more being right, that they feel justified, and I think that makes somebody even more dangerous. There's so many nods to Vader and how you first meet him, and I think JJ was after something more youthful and unpredictable and someone who isn't polished.
The idea that this is a character who's influenced by that darkness started to allow a masked villain, which feels essential in a Star Wars universe, to take form and not feel like we were being naive and acting like there wasn't a Darth Vader.
It makes perfect sense that this guy has had a huge impact on everybody. And yes, this figure looms large for our villain, too.
There were benchmarks for everybody. When we hit those moments in this story that were a huge recall to what the Star Wars series has meant to everybody, I think probably one of the most memorable moments was when we were shooting on the Millennium Falcon.
To be on a stage where you're actually seeing the Millennium Falcon that feels sort of dreamlike, it brought some people to tears, literally.
Oh my gosh. I'm literally shaking, like this is insane.
I told you were in Star Wars.
I just remember running up the ramp, just giggling. I went through that whole place, messing it all up. And all the props people and the guys on set were just kind of like, okay, can you control him? Because I started running and I went to the cockpit. You know, that little ball thing, the Jedi training ball. I got that out, I started rolling that around. Oh, it was so fun.
So I walked onto that set, completely overwhelming. I really am at sixes and sevens, to say the least. And then they introduced me to Harrison Ford. I had nothing to say.
My favorite personal story, I was shopping at a random department store, and sure enough, who do I run into? Was Harrison Ford. I tapped him on the shoulder and said, Mr. Ford, I said, my name's Darren. I'm one of the production designers on Star Wars. I'm actually building the Millennium Falcon right now. And he goes, the toggle switches. And I go, toggle switches? He goes, when we built it the first time, none of the toggle switches had any springs in them.
They'd bought broken switches because they were much cheaper. So if you stood there long enough, the switch, which was in this position, and you moved to this position, would slowly come down behind you while you were standing there, because there was no spring in it. No budget for springs.
Good. And then I was here.
Can you put the springs in the switches this time? He said, yeah, boss, we got the budget for that.
Everyone was waiting for the line, which was Chewie, we're home. And we had given it the whole day because JJ really wanted it to be perfect.
Han and Chewie entering the Falcon.
I turned around and there must have been 200 people standing behind me, all staring at the monitor, wanting to see Harrison come into the Millennium Falcon for the first time. That was a huge moment.
And camera, action.
Chewie, we're home.
Ready. Stand by, please, Lewis. Height one.
Well done, Chuckle. Dear Peter is present on the set, offering his invaluable experience and advice, and it was great to have him there.
Getting back to the old days, the old ways of doing things. It's great. I wasn't walking very well because I tore a tendon in this knee about 2 years ago. That meant a knee replacement.
Because Peter's knees are not good. For many of the scenes, Jonas, who was a kind of stunt Chewie, is in the role.
When I put on the suit, I start rehearsing. I start doing what Peter does, and like there's a little wobbles and these Chewie-like awkward things that he does. Awkward but lovable.
I have had words with him about what Chewie does and what he doesn't do, and being relatively the same height does help.
I think I'm a little bit shorter than Peter was at his prime. At this point, I'm 7 feet. I believe he's 7'2".
Well, you tell him Han Solo just stole back the Millennium Falcon. For good.
We're about to shoot the scene where it's just a little private moment of him in the cockpit. This is a kind of sweet little privileged moment to see him alone, taking it in, reunited with the ship that he loves so much.
I'd been away so long, I looked at it and said, this doesn't look right. Was this here? And they said, yes. I said, I don't remember that, but okay. I've spent a lot of years here, and it was fun to see it again. There are things I remember about the cockpit and some of the funny stuff we went through.
Without precise calculations, we fly too close to a store, or bounce into a supermarket, and then...
And now, here's an exclusive look at our new movie, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story.
It's like the fantasy you always have as a kid. Everywhere is an amazing shot and an amazing character.
The Star Wars universe is quite human. It's got a very human base, and for that reason you can relate to it.
Ready, and action!
Your heart's beating and you're actually in this situation. You get something very genuine that you couldn't have planned.
You'll actually compose shots that if we were on a green screen set, you just wouldn't have known were available.
The pressure's so high. Like, we're making a film that's right touching my favourite movie of all time. But then if you're too respectful of it, that you daren't do anything new or different, take a risk, then what are you bringing to the table? X-Wing!
X-Wing! Kills the attack down there! Bang!
You can't have a bad day at work when you see there are stormtroopers there.
That kid, when you were 4 years old, grew up with Star Wars figures. It's a bit like just being that kid again. You're sort of going like, arr, arr, arr.
May the Force be with us.
This was clearly our cantina. It was a nod to the cantina, but if you look at Star Wars, the notion that the cantina is one of countless watering holes that exist in various corners of the galaxy felt like it's fair game. It's Star Wars, and if you don't have a version of that, I would leave feeling like, well, where was that? How could they not do the cantina?
Very exciting. Okay. Han Solo!
Hey, Maz.
Maz was a character that you meet at the moment in the film when things kind of come to a necessary pause.
Well, I know that JJ has been fascinated with motion capture, and it was something that he was really keen to have in his film.
Background and action.
On set, everything feels so real. And then there's me in this headcam walking around covered in dots. There's 149 dots put on my face every morning. It was the most alienating thing in the world.
She's got the nastiest teeth.
I became part of this whole thing from two different angles, as an overseer, if you like, or a consultant to do with performance capture. And then, of course, I was also playing the part of Snoke, the Nemesis character and general and leader of the dark side in this particular version.
If Skywalker returns, the new Jedi will rise.
It doesn't feel yet right. Andy has been a great support. He has encouraged me as much as possible to let go of the oddness of the things I'm wearing and just find the character as I would in any other circumstance.
Solo, what is she doing?
I don't know, but it ain't good.
So we're on E stage, which is the Resistance base. At the very beginning of this, you say it's a Death Star, and then you say, was that
The
the case?
scene that made me feel like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, is when all of the cast are around that table planning.
How is it possible to power a weapon of that size?
It uses the power of the sun. You see General Akbar speaking, and you couldn't buy this as a Star Wars fan. It doesn't get any cooler than that. I can shut down the shields, but I need to be there on the planet. I mean, that scene was incredible, though. Poe Dameron's there, Harrison was there, Princess Leia, C-3PO, R2-D2's in the corner.
BB-8, you're wasting your time.
In the first film, in episode 4, 3PO, his left leg was silver. The idea was that 3PO had a history. Star Wars didn't just happen out of nowhere. It wasn't page 1 of a new story, but you were kind of tuning into a chapter here. Move forward, and JJ takes that idea several notches higher. 3PO, he has a red arm because something's happened to him in the last 30 years. The rebels have had all sorts of dramas, and one of his was clearly losing a limb. And then, oh, hey, here's one. It's not the right color, but we'll spray it later.
The story as to how he got his red arm is actually going to be in a comic book that they're doing as a separate piece.
I'm the custodian of Princess Leia, so it's my job to kind of protect her. It's my whole life, so I was very nervous. The first day I had was this massive scene. I was scared that I would make mistakes, and I made mistakes. Destroyed maybe the one chance we have of finding my brother.
She hadn't acted in a while. I think she was nervous going into this.
It was basically the worst day I've ever had on a film set in my life. Then it ended, and I got to go to sleep and come in another day, and it was better.
Once we started to do it, she seemed to fall into it very easily. To bring a character to life that you hadn't played in 30-some years. I mean, I understand for all of them how daunting that could be.
Carrie's an amazing and unique person. I'm trying to be helpful.
When did that ever help? And don't say the Death Star.
We don't see each other that frequently when we're not working, so it was fun to catch up, and they've written some really interesting scenes for us.
You could always see him clearer than I did.
I don't know what I saw.
Can you imagine those two people together? They were good initially, and then they reverted to type.
I went back to the only thing I was ever any good at.
We both did.
I get it. But it could be. I mean, it could be like this.
The fun of celebrating the return of these characters that we know is certainly a part of this movie, but I never felt like we were telling a story about Leia, Luke, or Han necessarily. It felt like a story about a generational handoff, that this was really a story about Rey, about Finn, about Poe, and about Kylo Ren. And you can't have that handoff without cost.
Background.
You know, no matter how much we fought, I've always hated watching you leave.
It needed to serve this purpose of giving our new characters the mantle. And that was a big, scary decision.
If you see our son, bring him home.
It was the scene that I think that terrified me the most.
And yet it was an absolutely critical part of the story, and mostly perhaps for the villain of the piece.
His destiny is resolved in a powerful and effective way.
Bang. Bang.
I enjoyed playing the character in the first. I enjoyed playing the character in the second. By the time we got to the third, I thought there was possibly no useful purpose for this character except as a human sacrifice. It's not that I wanted Han Solo to die. I wanted Han Solo to be able to lend some significant emotional weight to the story. I was resolved to be useful and to pass on responsibilities to others and get out of the way.
We spent a lot of time keeping as few people as possible on the set, and, you know, it's a serious scene. It was emotional. It was emotional for the actors, both Harrison and Adam Driver.
I wanted to avoid that scene as much as possible, and then I was also very excited to do it, but to go to that place, what it brought up in myself was a lot.
And action.
We're not kidding here. This is serious stuff, and we wanted it to be right.
You have all these things that are going on in your head, but that really goes away when you're staring across from that other person.
The unique and very deeply emotional and troubling way in which Han Solo meets his fate, I thought gives incredible opportunity and helps realize the full potential of the character that Adam Driver plays.
He was so generous that there really wasn't much I had to do other than respond to him.
I don't even want to think how people are going to react to that.
It was a necessary component. This is not just the Force Awakens in a young woman. This is the dark side of the Force awakening in the villain. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a moment we should acknowledge. It wraps a man who was a hero to us before this movie, but he's even more so today. And I cannot thank you enough for the gift of you in this movie. We love you. Harrison Ford, ladies and gentlemen. Luke Skywalker was, for me, always the way into Star Wars. This movie was always very much about getting to him.
If you imagine a place where the Jedi Order could have actually first emerged, that's what led me to Skellig Island at the end of this movie, because this is a place that emerged in 600 AD as a Christian retreat from the world.
It's an ancient site of a monastery, and it's like nothing you've ever seen, ever. Once you get up there, boy, it's so beautiful and so magical.
Skellig was the first meeting of Rey and Luke, and so late on, there's such a big build-up.
There's a real ambiguity as to what his reaction is. I think he has great reservations. He's really conflicted. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
While this was never his story, this movie, it was all about him. It was all about how critical Luke is to the continuation of this amazing story. So what I'm most excited about is the story of Luke Skywalker and where it goes.
I think for many people, a marker is Star Wars.
I know it's a film, but actually it means much more than that. For me, Star Wars seemed like a kind of universe that might accept me. There might be a place for me in that universe.
People love it so much. It is a family experience. That's what it is. It's not even a movie. Just families do Star Wars together. It's a verb.
This is like an opportunity to thank everyone for a lifetime of support, of love. If it weren't for the fans, we wouldn't be sitting here. And I've never forgotten that.
The other day, I was looking at that original poster, and I was remembering there was something about Star Wars that made me feel like anything was possible, that like when you see that star field, it felt like every point of light was a story.
The value that people place in these stories is deep and abiding. These stories have been passed down in families from generation to generation. It becomes valuable as a family experience, and so it's passed down, like family history.
We'll see each other again. I believe that.